Hello, and welcome to Ewe University. I'm Dr. Kelly. It's only been a few days since I last recorded, but I wanted to try to get back on schedule. When I last talked to you, we were having a beautiful spring weather, and then we had snow. So Mother Nature's reminding us that it's still, in fact, winter. My flowers today are the same pretty lilies that I had last time, but so many of them have bloomed that they are just crowding the vase now. There are still a few more little ones that have yet to bloom, so I should have some beautiful lilies for a while. We only have a couple more days in February, so the Month of Letters challenge is almost over. This was a challenge where you send a card or letter each day of the month, not counting Sundays and holidays. So for this month, that was 24 days and 24 cards. This week, I did have a chance to make some cards, and I'm really excited about the ones that I made. Here is one of them. Basically, I used a 3-step stamp set to make the flowers, and then did the flower stems and stamped sending love in the upper right-hand corner. Then I put 2 ribbons, one's a little thinner and one's a little thicker along the bottom. Now I thought I would take a minute to show you a fun and useful tool for card making, if you're interested. It is called a mini Misti, and it's an acrylic box with a clear movable lid. There's a thin foam pad that is placed on the floor of the box to create a flexible platform for stamping. The way the Mini Misti works is that your acrylic or photopolymer stamps stick to the clear lid. You place the cardstock on the foam pad and hold it down with 2 very strong little magnets if you want to. Ink up the stamps on the lid, then close the lid on top of the cardstock and press down. The image will be inked onto your paper. The nice thing about the Mini Misti is that it allows you to make a lot of cards in kind of an assembly line method. All you have to do is re-ink your stamps and then put a new piece of cardstock in the box. So every time you'll get the stamps in the same place on the paper. It's also great for doing multiple layer stamp sets like what I did for this card. The flowers each have 3 layers, and each layer is a different stamp. So first, you stamp the main color onto the paper. Then you remove that stamp and position the outline stamp so the lines are on the edge of the main color. And then you ink the outline stamp in a little darker color ink and stamp that onto the paper. Then remove that stamp. Finally, the 3rd stamp is the middle of the flower, and for that I used a different color ink. So again, you just position that stamp, ink it up, and then stamp onto the paper. For the flowers, the last thing I did was apply some sparkles to the middle using a brush pen called the Wink of Stella. And that just puts down a clear liquid with some shimmer in it. So the Mini Misti is a quick and easy way to help you make handmade cards. I got mine on Amazon for around $45, and I'll put a link in the description box below if you want to check it out. And all of my stamps are from Stampin' Up, and I'll put a link to their website down below as well. And by the way, thank you to everyone who sent cards this week. I love going to my mailbox and having happy mail waiting for me. I'm feeling better this week. My cold is dissipating and the cough is getting better. If you saw my video from last week, oh my gosh, the last 5 minutes I was about losing my voice, but I made it through. And thanks everyone for your comments on my videos here on YouTube, as well as on Ravelry and Instagram. I really love hearing from all of you. I did receive a nice message from a viewer pointing out an error that was made in my video where I reviewed the interchangeable needle sets last week. when I was talking about the signatures, I said that the needle tips are made of nickel-plated brass, but they're actually made from aircraft quality aluminum. The nickel-plated brass are the addies. So thank you for catching that, kind viewer. Now, another viewer asked if I had all the information that I presented in the interchangeable needle review in an Excel file. And actually, I do. In fact, I think there's even a little more information in my Excel file because I measured things like the taper length and calculated the taper angles. So anyway, yes, I do have it all in an Excel file. And I'm making that Excel file available to anyone. If you're interested in seeing it, I will put a link to that file in the description box below. And in case anyone wants the same file in PDF format, I have that too, and I'll include a link to that below as well. Okay, well, it's only been a few days since I last recorded, so I have not had much knitting time in that short period. However, in going through my works in progress, I discovered an old project that I'm going to deem complete. So we're just going to say it has graduated. The project is a little stuffed toy that is really cute. It is called the Egg to Alligator, and here it is. This little white ball is the egg. And then when you turn it inside out, it becomes an alligator. Super cute, right? Well, you might notice that this alligator is missing its legs. It's also missing a face, and it's missing a little ruffle down its back. But I just cannot bring myself to do those little components of this project. The legs are supposed to be little short I-cord type things, and the face is supposed to be embroidered eyes and mouth. But what I discovered in knitting this cute little guy is that I do not enjoy making fiddly little things. These eyes are actually baubles, and I hate making baubles in general. This project is just not the type for me. But I know a lot of people who love making little stuffies and all kinds of adorable toys, and I think that's great. But I've discovered that it's just not my thing. Having said that, I still can highly recommend this pattern. If you like making toys, if you like knitting little intricate things, then you will love this. This pattern is from this wonderful book by Susan B. Anderson called Topsy Turvy Inside Out Knit Toys. It is filled with the most adorable reversible toys. Every single one of the patterns makes two toys where you turn one inside out and it becomes something else. So this is what the Egg to Alligator is supposed to look like when it has a face, legs, and back ruffle. There's a cute little flower fairy where the fairy hides inside the flower. There's a squirrel and a hedgehog. How cute is that? Anyway, there are 12 different reversible toy patterns in this book. Plus, it's a spiral bound book, so it will sit flat on a table. So yeah, if you love to knit toys, then I think this will be right up your alley. You probably need to get this book. And if you're interested in what yarn I used for this project, it is Cascade Avalon, which is a 50-50 cotton acrylic blend. Really nice yarn. The green is color number 14, and the white is color number 1. And I used a US size 6 or 4.25 millimeter needle for this project. And I'll leave links to the book and to the yarn below if you want to check them out. I recently finished listening to an audiobook of the novel Oil and Marble by Stephanie Story. This book is about Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo Buonarroti. Even if you have little knowledge of the art world, and I'm certainly no expert there, you will undoubtedly have heard of Michelangelo and Leonardo. Leonardo was a talented inventor and scientist who created designs for things like the bicycle, the helicopter, submarine, and tank, which would not be actually built for centuries after his death. And as far as artwork, his most famous paintings are The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. Michelangelo also gave the world some great treasures in painting and sculpture, like the Sistine Chapel and the Statue of David. The time period in this book is 1501 to 1505, when both men lived and worked in Florence, Italy. Leonardo was around 50 years old and at the height of his career, and Michelangelo was an ambitious, young upstart who was determined to prove himself to the city of Florence and to his father. While the artists were active in Florence, they developed quite a rivalry that makes for a thrilling story. The book opens in Rome, just as Michelangelo unveils his Pietà sculpture to much admiration. He returns to his home city of Florence to see what the future holds for his career. At the same time, Leonardo has moved from Florence from Milan. The premise of the story is this: what if these two brilliant artists and forward thinkers competed for a renowned piece of marble and the chance to create something magnificent with it? There is a heated competition among the elite artists of Florence to win the commission. Michelangelo wins, much to the dismay of Leonardo, who thought the competition was merely a formality and that the stone was his to carve. So Michelangelo sets out to create a statue of David that will inspire and represent the people of Florence. Meanwhile, after losing, Leonardo focuses on scientific endeavors until he meets a woman who inspires him to paint the Mona Lisa. In painting her, he wants the world to know her soul. Additionally, he wants to create a piece of art that will rival Michelangelo's sculpture. So you might wonder, why not just read a history book about the two artists? You already know how it's going to end, with the creation of two of the most iconic works of art in history. And the answer is easy, because a history book doesn't come with this kind of storytelling. The author does an excellent job of molding fact and fiction together. She sticks to the concrete facts as the skeleton of the story, but then creates real personalities for the two artists, complete with self-doubt and failures, along with genius. She provides vivid descriptions of the landscape, the artists' family lives, their studios, and the politics of the time. Along the way, there are cameo appearances by art maestro Botticelli, fledglings Raphael and Donatello, and the ruthless politician Machiavelli. The story alternates between Michelangelo and Leonardo's viewpoints, giving the reader a first-hand account of how their rivalry began, took shape, and ultimately was a driving force behind two of the greatest artistic achievements in history. The part of this book that is so engaging is the relationship between the two artists and how their competitive ambitions motivate and challenge them to create better art and push their own boundaries. The only letdown of the book is that it really doesn't have a climactic moment. Maybe that's because we already know how the historical components play out, but it seemed like I wanted a little more at the end. Still, the book is enjoyable, readable, and captivating. The author combines her thorough knowledge of the subject matter with a knack for storytelling. I think if you are a fan of historical fiction and of art history, you will love it. I'm giving it 4.5 stars. Now, the reader, PJ Auckland, was okay, but not great. His voice sounds like the generic voiceovers of every grade school documentary you've ever seen. I thought he did do an Italian accent really well, though. But just the regular reading was not bad enough to ruin the whole book, but meh. So he gets 3 stars. And again, that audiobook is Oil and Marble by Stephanie Story. Today I am showing you a super neat little gadget that I haven't really seen talked about a lot, and that is a yardage counter. Now, yes, you can buy yardage counters from Laces for $36 or from Nancy's Knickknacks for $60, but both of those products use this exact same yardage counter, and this is the Berkeley yardage counter, which is actually used for fishing, in fishing for measuring yardage of fishing line. But as you can see, it can also be used for measuring the yardage of yarn. I have used this for all weights of yarn, from fingering weight to chunky weight, and it works just fine. It even has a little knob on the side where you can adjust the tension to adapt to different thicknesses of yarn. The Berkeley yardage counter is small and doesn't take up a lot of space. It is 2¼ inches wide by 1½ inches deep by 1½ inches tall. It has a clip on the bottom so you can attach it to something, which is useful to do, and you can also use the bolt on the bottom to affix it tightly. Then the yarn gets threaded through the slot along the side, and as it's pulled through, the meter starts counting up. Note that the yarn needs to be pulled from the top to the bottom, or the counter will go backwards. The counter measures in feet, which you can translate into yards or meters or whatever measurements you're looking for. To reset it, you just press this little button on top and the numbers go back to 0. Now, the key to using this little measuring tool is that you have to keep the yarn taut. You have to keep the tension fairly tight and on the bottom of the slot, or it won't do your measurement. In my testing of the accuracy of the measurements, I found that it's pretty good, but if you want exact precision in your yardage, this may not be the right tool for you. It's a decent, helpful estimate of your yarn yardage. I found that to get the most accuracy, you need to subtract the 1½ inch width of the tool from both the beginning and the end of the yarn that you're measuring. So that's a total of 3 inches overall, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal, especially when you're measuring long lengths of yarn. You can get the Berkeley yardage counter on Amazon for around $12, which is way more economical than paying for the Laces or Nancy's Knickknacks setups. However, with those, you get the counter attached to a solid piece of wood with metal loops that will keep the yarn taut. So for $12, you can do it yourself, or for more, you can buy one of those. And I will include links to the Berkeley line counter as well as the Laces and Nancy's Knickknacks products in the description box below, in case you're interested in checking them out. And I'm wondering if you've used the Berkeley counter to measure your yarn yardage, or maybe you have another gadget you use for that. Let me know what you've used and how well it's worked in the comment section below. For today's classroom segment, I just wanted to do a quick first impressions video of the different styles of yarn swifts. I'm sure most of you already know that a yarn swift is an adjustable device upon which a hank of yarn is placed in order to wind it into balls. It's often used in conjunction with a ball winder, which creates center pole balls or cakes, or I like to call them little yarn muffins. Or you could use the swift to hold the yarn while you wind the ball by hand. Now, the word swift comes from the Old English word for revolve, and it also has ties to the Old Norse with the same origin as the word swivel. So, swivel and swift. So the yarn swift swivels around either horizontally or vertically and makes it easier for you to handle the yarn. The swift is only needed when the yarn comes in hank form, meaning that the yarn is in a big loop and it's really hard to knit from until you wind it into a ball. If you've ever tried winding a yarn ball without a swift, you know how challenging that can be. You have to use the backs of your dining room chairs or have somebody hold the hank of yarn for you. Otherwise, it will become a horrible tangled mess. Now, when the yarn comes in hanks, the loops of yarn are often in different sizes. Some, like this one, are smaller circles, and some are larger. So compare these two. You can see that one's much smaller than the other. Now, some hanks might be as small as a 36-inch circumference, while others might be larger, up to 120 inches in circumference. And that's a huge difference. It seems like a lot of hanks are around 48 to 60 inches in circumference, but there's definitely a lot of variability in sizes. So it's imperative to have a swift that will adjust to the different hank circumferences. The most common yarn swifts I've come across are the umbrella swifts. These can be made out of wood or metal, and they usually will collapse pretty flat for storage. But when you want to use them, you place the circle of yarn onto the closed yarn swift and then open it until it's holding the circle of yarn up. You open the yarn swift similarly to an umbrella, pushing the tightening screw upward along the center spindle so that the ribs expand and hold the opened hank of yarn in place. Then secure in that position by turning the tightening screw. So the umbrella ribs adjust to the size of the hank. It will be thinner or on smaller circumference skeins and wider on larger circumference skeins. You can get umbrella swifts that have a flat base that sit on top of a table, or that have a clamp which can be attached to the side of a table. I've even seen a few that are tall and stand on the floor. Now, my umbrella swift is a middle-of-the-road model. It is a stanwood, which is made from finely sanded birch wood. It's a large size, which can handle skeins up to 8.5 feet in circumference. The ribs of it are tied with hemp cord, which is pretty much like every other umbrella swift. Mine has a clamp on base, which allows it to be firmly fixed at the edge of a table, chair, bench, or any surface up to 1 3/4 inches thick. This swift is really big and needs a lot of space to spread out. Stanwood also makes a medium-sized umbrella swift, which is smaller and can handle hanks of yarn up to 6 feet in circumference. So if you're limited on space, you might want to assess the amount of room you have to set up one of these umbrella swifts. Another idea is that you can anchor the clamp onto something like the back of a chair so that the swift turns vertically, and that might work better for some people. Overall, umbrella swifts can be very inexpensive to very expensive. I've seen some low-cost ones for like $20 and other luxury brands that use beautiful exotic wood for hundreds of dollars. The more economical ones tend to be suitable only for very lightweight yarn and smaller circumference hanks. They're not as sturdy as the ones you pay a little more money for, and I've heard that people have had problems with them breaking. Now, mine cost around $50, and it's sturdy. It works just fine for my home use purposes. If I had a yarn shop, I'd probably invest in something more higher end, but I have not had any problems with it, and I've been happy with it. Okay, so that is the umbrella swift. Now, another style of swift that seems to be gaining in popularity is the tabletop or Amish style swift. Let's see if I can bring that in here. This type of yarn swift is made from wood and consists of two long, thin pieces of wood that crisscross in the middle, creating 4 arms. On each of these arms is a series of holes into which pegs can be inserted. And these pegs delineate the circumference of the hank of yarn. So there are different holes so that the pegs can be moved to accommodate different sizes of hanks. And then the whole thing spins around, allowing you to create yarn balls or muffins. One nice thing about the Amish swifts is that if you or someone you know are handy with woodworking, you can fairly easy make one yourself. In fact, this is my first yarn swift. It's an Amish style swift that my husband made for me. He found some instructions online and whipped this up in a couple of hours. I'll try to find those instructions or something similar and put a link below so you can check that out. So this swift didn't cost much at all, just a few dollars for the pieces of wood and a bolt. Even if you buy an Amish swift, they are often less expensive than the umbrella swifts. Of course, there's still a price range, but for example, you can get a stanwood for about $25, which is half the price of my stanwood umbrella swift. The way you use an Amish swift is to put it on top of a table or a flat surface and spread the hank of yarn out across all 4 arms. Adjust the pegs so that they're holding the yarn fairly firmly. Then, of course, cut the piece of yarn holding the hank together and then find the end and start making your yarn ball. Now, the thing you probably need to think about if you're considering an Amish swift is where you might store it. Maybe you would just leave it out all the time, but if you need somewhere to put it away, be aware that they can take up a lot of space. Some of the Amish swifts are able to be dismantled for storage, but some are not. So storage is one issue with this kind of swift. If you can't take it apart, you're going to need a space wide enough to accommodate the arms. And mine does not come apart, so that has been a challenge to make space to store it. So that is the tabletop Amish style swift. The last style of yarn swift I'm going to talk about today is a vertical swift. I've already mentioned that you can use your umbrella swift vertically, but there are some swifts that are specifically made for holding the yarn hank vertically. In doing a Google search, I found that there are a lot of handmade vertical swifts of various designs available for purchase. A lot of these seem to be used by dyers who hand dye yarn and buy their yarn in cones and then need to wind the yarn into hanks. Some of the styles include the squirrel cage, which runs from about $120 to around $250. The heavy-duty skein winder from Crazy Monkey, which can cost up to $1,000 depending on what features you get. And a simpler version of this that you can get on Etsy for $85. The vertical swift that I have is called a GoCo swift, and it is made by the Shacked Company. A lot of people say it looks like a steampunk Ferris wheel. It is actually a Japanese design that's based on industrial swifts. It's very smooth and especially good for fine yarns like lace weight yarn or more delicate fibers. But I've used it for all different weights of yarn and content. I mostly use it for sock yarn that's wool or wool blend. What I really like it for is rescanning. What I mean is that if I wind a hank of yarn into a ball, thinking that I'm going to start a project with it, but then for whatever reason the project doesn't get off the ground, or I end up frogging the project, then I use the GoCo to reskein the yarn back into hank form. Okay, so the GoCo consists of a wooden base with 2 arms extending upward. It weighs 6 pounds and can sit on the table or on the floor. At the top of the wooden arms are slots into which the metal wheel is inserted. The wheel itself is made from aluminum and it is a bit fragile. I mean, it could easily get bent out of shape if it were dropped or handled roughly, so you do have to be a little careful with it. On the other hand, the lightweight flexibility of the thin metal is part of what makes it work so well. To use it as a yarn swift, you remove the wheel and place the open hank around the outside of the wheel. The wheel is adjustable, but not as much as the other types of swifts. The GoCo can only be adjusted to hold skeins with a circumference of 57 to 64 inches, which is 4.5 feet to a little over 5 feet. So its adjustability is a lot more limited than the others. To adjust it, you just loosen the bolts on the side of the wheel and then turn the side panels, which in turn makes the arms of the wheel kind of shrink in or expand outward. So you can see it does adjust a bit, but not a lot. Storage is an issue with this swift. It does not break down in any way to fit into a smaller space for storage. So like with the Amish style swift, you do have to figure out a place to store it. But I know some people like to leave it out because it's interesting looking and adds character to their craft room. Now the GoCo is not as common as the umbrella swift or the Amish table swift. At least I haven't seen it mentioned a lot in the knitting world. I do like mine and have used it quite a bit. Like I said, I do use it for rescanning a lot, because it's easier to spin this lightweight metal wheel than the wood umbrella swift. So just a personal preference, I guess. I purchased my GoCo swift from the Woolery online a couple of years ago. I just looked and the current pricing is around $150. Now I have seen DIY versions of this type of vertical yarn swift. People have made them out of PVC pipe and even Tinker Toys. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find specific instructions for those, but if I can, I will put links below because that would be a savings if you're looking for economy. But if you're interested in something different or smoother than other swifts, or maybe an easier way to reskein yarn that doesn't cost as much as some of the other reskeiners out there, then the shacked GoCo swift might just be right for you. And as always, I will include links to all of these swifts I've talked about in the information box below. Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. I hope you've enjoyed seeing an overview of the different swift styles that are available. Did you see anything that was new to you? And of course, I'm interested in what kind of swift you like. What do you use? What have your experiences been with the swifts you've used? Good? Bad? Ugly? Or are you in the market for a new swift? And in that case, which of these styles appealed to you the most? Or maybe you've seen something else. I would love to hear from you. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, please feel free to comment if you have any questions about today's show, or if you have an idea for what you'd like to see on future episodes, or if you'd like to see a product tested. Leave your suggestions in the comment section below. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and I'll see you in the next video. Now, before I go, I wanted to mention that you can expect my next video on April 3rd. When I started this new video series back in January, I had planned on releasing 8 episodes and then taking a short break to give me time to prepare new material and shoot some new video footage. So this is episode 8, and that's what I'll be doing for the next few weeks in March. So we'll just call this spring break at Ewe University, and then I'll be back at the beginning of April with some exciting new topics that I hope you'll enjoy. In the meantime, have a sparkly week or a sparkly month. Bye, everybody.